And so I spent, honestly, man, about 18 months watching dozens and dozens of 70s movies, and French New Wave cinema and Italian neorealist cinema to sort of be able to write holdovers.
I saw the movie weeks ago now, maybe a month ago, but it's just been pinballing around.
Oh my God.
I mean, there's not a whole lot else going on in here, but it's
No, there
definitely
is.
taking up.
You're a complicated guy. You're a complicated guy. Don't tell me you aren't. I know you are. I can tell.
Well, I'm so glad you said that, because that's kind of my first question, is that I think of what it means to be like human, a person,
Yeah.
and the idea of having these paradoxes, these contradictory ideas in our head,
Sure.
like hating school and hating your teachers, but carrying their wisdom for like your entire life.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like I literally have nightmares about being back in school.
Yep.
But I think about my teachers every day.
Yeah, they have a positive and sometimes negative influence. Sometimes they model what not to do, but oftentimes, like, there's just stuff that you're not ready for back in the day, and it could be, it could be the context of adolescence, which is a difficult and fraught time to begin with. Yeah, but I feel like oftentimes teachers. My dad was a teacher. Like, teachers will give you things that don't really come to fruition for decades, and then all of a sudden you're like, oh my God, that's what they were talking about. Which is awesome. I think that's what great teachers do. And even bad teachers do that sometimes,
So if I'm not mistaken, this started out as a TV spec script, as like an idea for a series, right?
Yeah. What happened was I wrote this pilot about my own personal experiences at this prep school. I call it, the name of the pilot, Stonehaven. And it was very much the story of like me going to the school. My father, my parents divorced, and I was kind of estranged from my dad. He was teaching there, and it was sort of like, and then my uncle, who sort of had become my de facto father, this sort of troika of people, that were influencing me. And Alexander got a hold of it, and had been thinking about this idea for about a dozen years about a prep school over Christmas, and called me up out of the blue. I almost hung up on him because I thought someone was bullshitting me. I'm dead serious, man. I have a buddy named Bob. He's a screenwriter, and he has in the past called me up and kind of disguised his voice and said, like, David Hemingson, Francis Ford Coppola, and I'm like, oh God. How did you, I contacted WM. I was wondering, and like, I'll get all breathless and I'll be like, well, I don't know what to say. And he's like, psych, you're an idiot. Like, let's go get a beer. And I'm like, why are you so cruel to me? I don't understand. But the phone call came, and I was driving back from LAX, and I didn't even see who it was. I was kind of tired, and I picked up the phone. David Hemingson, Alexander Payne. And I was about to say, fuck you, Bob, and hang up. And then I saw the Omaha area code, and I was like, oh, is this really Alexander Payne? He's like, yeah, no. And he said, I read your TV pilot, I loved it. I thought, okay, great, he's gonna make my pilot. Immediately said, I don't want to make your pilot, but I would love it if you wrote a movie for me in the same world. So would you write a prep school movie for me? And I was like, yeah, I'll do that right now. Absolutely. And that's how it happened. He'd read the pilot, and then I sort of broke it totally. He had a log line for the movie he wanted, which was kind of ocularly challenged, odiferous professor stuck at Christmas as punishment with these kids, and one of the kids' mothers has abandoned him because she's gone on her honeymoon. That's what he had. Go. And so everything else was sort of, I kind of made up everything else.
So you didn't know Alexander?
No, but one of the reasons I'm still with my now manager, used to be agent, was that I wrote this pilot, and he was sort of like, I really like this weird little pilot you wrote that's so specific no one will ever make. So thanks for wasting my time and yours. Kind of like, he said to me, like, I'm like, oh yeah, okay. But I guess I'll hang on to it because it's a nice piece of writing. And then he managed to get to a friend of Alexander's because he'd heard that from this friend who's also a client of my manager. So he had a client who knew Alexander and got it to Alexander through that client.
Not to put the cart in front of the horse or anything, but would you like to expand that pilot as like a sequel spin-off kind of thing?
I don't think it would ever line up with the Holdovers, because it's actually set in 1980. I think it would, honestly, between you and me, brother, I think it would make a great TV show. I still do. And I think it who knows? It would see what happens with the Holdovers, but I'd love to make that show because I think it's a period piece, but from 1980, that one, so it's a slightly different vibe.
Had you written a movie before? I mean, most of your published stuff is TV. I imagine it's a similar but different skill.
Yeah, it is exactly right. You're entirely correct. It is a similar but different skill. But I had written films. I actually had a film. I sold a movie, with my buddy Bob. Uh, some like I would say 15 years ago. So I'd written movies, like one or two movies, but I spent all my time developing, working in television, and it was a totally new. I would say I know how to write a movie, but I didn't know how to write an Alexander Payne movie, which is a different thing, And I had to learn. I kind of went to film school in Alexander's back because I had to educate myself. He wanted to make a '70s film. I knew his whole oeuvre. I knew his everything he'd done. But I hadn't, like, when he was like, I want to make a Hal Ashby movie. I'd seen Hal Ashby movies, but in order to write The Holdovers, I want to give a shout out, and this is really important to me, to Cinephile Video on the corner of Sawtell and Santa Monica, and two guys, Greg and JP, who work there, who basically helped me become a screenwriter, a real true screenwriter by turning me on to movies. Like, I'd go in looking for the Ashby stuff, and I get into it and go, okay, well, you've gotten through that, but you got to check out the Rayfield Center. You got to check out the Altman over here, or you know what dovetails nicely, because they knew what the nature of the project. This Truffaut movie, 400 Blows, check that out. And so I spent, honestly, man, about 18 months watching dozens and dozens of 70s movies, and French New Wave cinema and Italian neorealist cinema, to sort of be able to write Holdovers.
It's not just watching them; it's like dissecting them and
absolutely, man, 100% taking notes. Okay, like sometimes outlining the pictures as they're going by as quickly as I could to go, what is the sequence? What's the narrative sequence? How are the characters changing? What's the shift? What's the amplification? It's very, very granular.
So you write the movie, and then are you on set, or is it like sending your kid off to school?
I produced this one too, so I was on set for this one, which was great, and I'm very glad I was. I think I tried. I hope I offer Alexander some insight. The nature of our collaboration is that, when I was on set I would watch, because I've been a showrunner, so I know that you don't want to step into anybody's zone. So I would just watch, and if I thought there was something in the screenplay that was being missed or needed amplification, I just whisper in his ear, and then he'd do it or not do it. But film is a director's medium. So I was honored to be on set. I was delighted to be on set. I never want to be anywhere but on set, but you don't always get that, I was very lucky.
As producer, did you have any input on casting? Like,
absolutely, yeah, no, all the major roles, we went through together, and we disagreed sometimes. And honestly, director is the tie-breaking vote. But I leaned on a few things that got done, and it made me very proud. And he was going to go. He might have gone in that direction, but a few actors, I was just like, that kid's amazing. You got to. I think he's perfect, and here's why. And he would listen. He's Alexander's a brilliant guy and a great collaborator. I mean, it's really lovely to work with him.
I've talked to writers and all of the collaboration that just has to happen.
Yeah.
Just by the nature of the beast.
Yeah.
It's you and it's Alexander, and I imagine Paul has a lot to say about his his character.
He does. I mean, Paul. But the thing about Paul, I wrote this for Paul. That's why his character's name is Paul. Like, and that was a very, I think, second or third conversation with AP was sort of like, how do you feel about Paul Giamatti? I'm like, I love Paul Giamatti. I want to go on vacation with Paul Giamatti. What can we do? I'll do anything with Paul Giamatti. He's like, write this picture for him. I said, no problem. And so, yeah, he's just great. And his interpretation, pretty consistent. Like, honestly, he did exactly what I was hoping he would do with the character, because I wrote it with him in mind. And he just I'm biased, man, but I think he crushed it. I think he did a great job.
I agree.
Thank you.
The movie is fantastic. It's a beautiful snapshot. I mean, I wasn't around in the 70s, but it's just such it felt like I was there.
Awesome. I'm so glad to hear that. Thank you. And it was meant to be sort of a moment in time, like both timely and timeless. I wanted it to be of that time, but also have implications for now and going forward,
At a time, but like that depiction of like upstate, I'm from New York City, but the Northeast region is just so lovely. I love it.